Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to today's session hosted by Italian Community Chapter of Turin. I am Stefano, UiPath Community MVP 2023 and also organizer for the Turin chapter. Here with me helping with the chat and Q&A is Enrico Bruno, which is RPA project manager. Today we are talking about the process assessment matrix. So I think it's a quite interesting topic, not discussed so much. So if you have any questions or curiosities or anything else during the meeting, feel free to join and write in chat any of your questions. And also you can unmute your microphone and take questions directly at any time. So this is the agenda for today. It will be quite an interactive session. So we have not so much slides. Not we hope it won't be any boring as it may be. And so we have a quick introduction. Then we jump on before the documentation. We discuss the theory of the process assessment matrix and what are the things to estimate in the assessment phase. And then we will have a few examples of real use case so we can use directly the process assessment matrix. As I said before, we have a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to join whenever you want if you have any questions. So before starting the presentation, I ask you to join on slido.com #RPA or use the QR code. We have a couple of questions just to getting to know what are your thoughts regarding the process assessment matrix, and so we can also use it for discussion. I will also share the results here. So you can use the QR code in the picture. Wait a couple of seconds more. So if there is anyone else that want to answer. Okay, last 10 seconds. If you want to answer still, then we have another question, and then we can discuss the results. Okay, so next question. In this question, you can rank all the possible answers. So you can choose for the most difficult, what you think is the most difficult thing to rank during a process assessment to what is the less difficult. I'm sure that it's not so easy to perform a classification because there are many different things that can be difficult, but just give it a try. I will try also myself, so then we can discuss it. Okay, I leave 1 more minute because I know that this can be long to answer. So if any one of you still need to answer, we have 1 minute left. Okay, so I see that is still one participant that is answering, but in the meantime we can talk about the answer because it's mostly what I expected also for our experience since the major problems in creating an assessment is to try to estimate or guess which can be the difficulties during the development. So, for example, some elements that cannot be spied correctly. This is one important thing that sometimes it takes days to solve, and also it expands the time of the development, which has not been estimated at the beginning of a project. So it can be a challenge to overcome, and the process assessment matrix is not quite useful in these cases. Another thing is as you answered, is the change of requirements after the assessments, because oftentimes the assessment is done using an initial documentation provided by business users or process owners, but some of the things will change after some time. So it will be necessary to perform a new assessment and perform a new estimation. So this can be a difficulty in the project organization. Also, as you answered, the lack of proper documentation is linked to the previous answer, because the documentation is provided directly by the clients oftentimes, so it's not possible uh, to perform an exact assessment on the logic and also on the, for example, the availability of the systems. So these are all things to consider when doing a process assessment. And in some of these cases, the metrics will come in help for us. So I resume the presentation. Okay, so before the process assessment matrix, so before the assessment phase, it's important to consider a few aspects in order to start the assessment with the correct behavior. One of the things to consider is the best practice. So what are all of the best practice that are to be in in uh, in step in the development phase and also in the analysis phase. So, for example, the documentation, how has to be created, who will create the documentation, and also for the development point of view, for example, the variables, the security aspects of the development. So, for example, if there are any systems that require special credential storage, if there are some assets that have to be provided in advance before the estimation. So these are all important aspects to consider before the creation of the process assessment. The next steps, the next points, coding standard and versioning are related to the best practice, but are specific for the development point of view. So before starting the assessment, we have to know what are the coding standards. For example, if we have some workflow, some templates already provided, and the versioning. So this is done both for the documentation and the development point of view. So we have to know where the documentation and the development take place, where we can find the new documentation available every time, and also the storage of the development phase. So if we have some versioning, for example, Git and so on. All things considered, we can start with the development of the effort estimation. Also, this is done usually with the process assessment matrix, as we will see, but we have to decide what is the matrix and what are the things that we take in consideration when providing an assessment. So it's important to create process assessment based on a few important things. The first thing is what to automate. So we have to know in advance that some of the process that we will assess will not be automated, because we will take in consideration only the processes that are repetitive, structured, well documented, and preferably with high risk. It's there are maybe a few processes that have all these checks, so there will be at a high benefit and low cost. There will be the first processes to automate. There will be other processes that maybe doesn't include all these deep points. We can take in consideration the automation of these processes as well, but we will then put it, as we say, in a queue and start with the low effort, high benefits first, and then proceed with the other automation. We will also take in consideration why we automate those processes. So it's better to start the automation with processes that have low added value for users. So as we said before, repetitive processes and let's say boring task that the users doesn't have to add uh, effort to do, and also processes with an high cost benefits ratio. So processes that cost less to automate, but provide higher benefits. So, for example, processes that are at high risk and very repetitive. So, like daily processes that perform tasks on finance departments, for example, invoice and so on. And finally, how to automate this process during the assessment. We can provide an opportunity assessment, so we can perform a point values type of scoring to the processes, and at the end of the assessment, every process will have an evaluation. Based on this evaluation, we will decide what are the processes that we will automate and what processes we won't automate. Finally, there is an important step on how to automate, because before the starting of the development, it's important to check eventual technology constraints. So, for example, if there are some systems that we will have to automate, but that don't provide a test system, it will be more difficult to create the automation during the development, because we will operate directly on the production environment of those systems. These things will be considered in the creation of the process assessment matrix that we talk, and that is the main topic of this presentation. In the process assessment matrix, there are many things that we use to perform the assessment, and I think that these are the three main categories in which we provide the scoring of the automation. So we will have to check the applications that are used in the automation. Particularly for every application, we will check the availability, so that if the application is always available, or if there are some constraints. For example, if there are some applications that on the weekend are not available, so some like governative websites and so on. If the application is stable, this is maybe it's easy to think about this, but it's really important, because if the application is not stable, it's more difficult to automate. The security that require the application, because, for example, some applications require the two-factor authentication and the double login with email or mobile phone. So that applications are more challenging to automate. And finally, as I said before, the environment. So if the application have a test environment available, it's better to automate, while if it has only the production environment, it can be challenging to perform the development. The second aspect is the documentation. As explained before, it's important that there is a workflow approval in place in the documentation. So the documentation is created usually by the business analyst and solution architect together with the business user, and will be approved by the business user or the process owner. The documentation has to have a fixed logic. It's important, because if there is some logic that is not explained in the documentation, it's difficult to provide an assessment. This is linked to the answer that you had you provided in the initial question for the change after the assessment. So that if the documentation is not clear in some logic, it's possible that there will be changes during the development phase. And finally, the exception handling. This is really important, because in the documentation, it's mandatory that is provided all all the exception that can arise and what has to be handled and in some way, in which way. So there can be some exception that have to stop the whole automation, while other exception can be handled and gone with the automation. But this is all important to provide a correct assessment. Finally, this is less linked to the development point of view, but it's important that the metrics are estimated correctly in the beginning of an automation. The daily rate, so which is the cost of a daily rate of the automation project, the experience rate. So if an automation is more difficult to automate, it will require the more experienced developer, so it will cost more. And finally, the business constraints. So maybe in some cases, it's important that an automation has to be delivered in some time constraints. Like for example, I need this automation within a month because it's really important to provide it early. So we will focus on the assessment of that automation and maybe put more developers together in a same project. So I don't know if you have any questions. I've seen that there is a question about the recording. Yes, the session is recorded and will be provided in the page in which you registered for the community, and also the PowerPoint will be shared in the same page, as well as the two examples of process matrix that we will see in a few minutes. So I don't know if you have any other question, curiosities, or so on in the theoretical part that we have seen until now. If not, we can go on and put your hands on a real process assessment matrix. So you will see how can be created one and how we can use. Okay, so this is an example of process assessment matrix. This is provided as an example directly by UiPath. You can find it in the Academy course for a business analyst if you want. But as I said before, I will share the download in the community page. It's just an example, so you can change it as you want for your better availability. As you can see, there is an initial page, which is the assessment sheet, in which there are a few questions that you can provide with the answer. In the right part, in the left part, there is the question and also the explanation. So it's quite easy to understand what the question means, and you will provide the answers on the right part. Like finally, in the final column, the result computation, there will be a few calculations, and in the final row, it provides directly which is the score in percentage from 0 to 100, and which is the benefit also in percentage. So you can just have a quick glimpse on what is the effort, which goes from low to high, and what is the benefit that also goes from low to high. Finally, in the last rows, there is the hours that are freed from the automation for the user from the automation, the error reduction, which is the same as the benefit, and also the time reduction. And finally, with this that is really important is the effort to implement. So how many hours will take to implement all these solutions. So these are all of a drop-down type, as you can see, and by selecting one, it will change directly the score. So, for example, if we add, instead of 2, 3 application, we put 4, 5, as you can see, the effort is higher. If we also, for example, we change if there is a VDI that is used, it changes drastically the effort. All these scores are taken from the scorecard sheet. So this is what you can personalize as you prefer, based on what you think has to weight more or less for an estimation. In this case, these are all the default scores. I left it like this because I think that are quite correct, but you can change it as you want. For example, this is the score that take the frequency of the process. So you can change it by just changing the number, and it will change the calculation on the assessment sheet. And the same goes for all the other answers. These are all the answers that are linked to the assessment sheet. So, for example, if we go on process peaks, we will have the same. I will move here so you can see better. We'll have the same answers that are brought in the scorecard. So you can personalize all the assessment sheet as you want. It's important to notice that here at the beginning of the scorecard, there are a few questions that are not, that doesn't have score, but are just textual. But these are the questions that are used at the beginning of a process assessment to decide which process have to be automated and which cannot be automated. So if a process cannot be automated, it doesn't have any sense to perform an estimation. While if it has to be automated, it can be automated, then the assessment will give also the benefit and the time. Finally, this is the sheet for the assumption of the time for the effort of the whole development. Also, as I said for the previous sheet, also in this sheet, it's possible to change the score. So, for example, these are all in months. So it's the number of months that will take for all the different people involved in an automation project. If you change these values, it will also change the total team effort, and it will change consequently the effort that we will show here. So here, as you can see in the formula, this is linked to the assumption effort sheet based on the effort that is taken from this cell. This final sheet is just the same as the first sheet, but it can be used for different processes. So it's just the same, but the questions are in column instead of row, and the answers are in the rows, but it's exactly the same. I don't know if you have any questions about this matrix. If you think that is maybe too difficult to understand or too easy, or it misses something, let we can discuss it together. Okay, so if there are not questions, I will show you another matrix, which is actually the one that we use in some of our processes. It's maybe a little different than the previous matrix. I think that it's more simple to understand, and also it has a few um, a few questions in advance as the previous matrix missing. So this is the equivalent of the first sheet in the previous matrix. So as you can see on the right, there are all the explanation of what has to be put as the level. So for example, the business process definition is detailed and documented. The high-level process exists, but there is not much documentation, or three, there is not documentation at all. And this has to be done for all the roles. So, for example, the subject matter expert has good knowledge of the documentation. The subject matter expert, which is the business owner of the automation, has limited knowledge. Or three, there is no subject matter expert that is available to know the process documentation. So this is the most important part for the estimation, and it checks the complexity of the process. Is similar to what has been done in the previous matrix. So the how many steps are in the process, the number of the output, how many technologies are used, and if there is external technologies. So, for example, OCR, intelligent artificial intelligence, and so on, which is the size of the data, how many sprints require the automation, the number of systems, and the number of inputs. This is another important part, which is about the risk of the process. So basically the stability and the frequent changes. So if a process is not stable, it's not so feasible for automation. And also if there are frequent changes on the process, the same goes as before. This, I think, is an important aspect that is not highlighted in the process assessment tool provided by UiPath, which is the reuse of existing components, because there are a lot of automation that maybe are difficult to automate, but have included many components or many applications that are already automated in other automations. So in that case, it will be easier to automate the process, even if maybe it's more difficult as another process. Finally, these two rows are similar to what we have in other assessment tool, and are related to the test case availability and the test environment and the infrastructure availability. All these scores, as you can see, provided a sum, and the sum will give a difficulty to automate. So this is the equivalent of the effort. This is taken from these thresholds. So we provide a minimum or maximum score based on the threshold with a percentage of error estimation. So if all the sum of the complexity goes inside one of the threshold, will will give the effort estimation. Also, in advance, it's possible to give different weights for the different topics. So as you can see, the process complexity has the maximum weight. So a change in a field of the process complexity. So for example, if here we put 2, it will go on, as you can see, a lot in the weighted sum. Like for example, if here we go to 1, it will change less. This obviously because the complexity of the process has an higher effort estimation as related, for example, the number of technologies. So this is another example of another process metrics that you can create based on your needs. From my point of view, it's always better to have a simpler simpler automation matrix with less answers, because it will be easier to fill and also more understandable for the business user, because at the end of the day, they are the one that have to check for the effort difficulty in order to know what will be the estimated time of the delivery of an automation. Okay, I have seen a question that asks if this sheet is available in the academy. No, this one is not available in the UiPath Academy, because it's the one that we use, we provided to our client usually, but I will share it also with you in the community page. So in the community in which you subscribed, in a maybe tomorrow, today or tomorrow at last, you will be able to download both the complexity matrices that we will see. I don't know if you have any questions about any of the two metrics. If you don't have any questions, we can try to use one or both the metrics to put the scores based on one process and see how it will affect the effort. So this is an example of a process that we created for a client. This process starts with the user that put some PDF files to elaborate in a shared folder, and the robot is scheduled. So we will start daily, every day at 8 o'clock, and retrieves every PDFs and moves it in a specific folder that is created by the robot, which is called workload. After that, for every PDF, it reads the PDF, the document with the OCR, and some PDF cannot be read correctly, so they are discarded. The ones that are recognized as valid are passed to a specific application which is installed on the PC in which the bots run, and this application extracts a barcode value which is printed in the PDF. Finally, for every of these PDF, the robot updates the goods status and values, so the barcode that is extracted from PDF, the material number, and the delivery date on SAP. And this is done for every of the PDF that is found in the workload folder. And at the end of the process, the PDFs are moved to the worked folder or the error folder, depending on the outcome of the automation, and stores all the reporting on an Excel report that is then put in the shared folder in which the user can after check the outcome of the automation. So for an automation like this, we can use the process assessment tool and, for example, put digital and structured if the PDF is digital. In our case, it's always digital and has the structured data, so we know where to find the invoice, the material number. We know where to find the barcode, and we know where to find the date. It's always in the same point. Then the tool asks if there are any change and the application will change in the next 3 months, 6 months. There will be no change because the two applications that are used are the barcode reader application, which is static, it just extract the barcode, and SAP, which is quite a stable application, and for what is used in this process will not change. So we can leave no change expected for both the points. After this, there are the overall result part, which asks how many FTEs are currently needed to perform this process. This is just an optional field, so it just gives a glance of the effort estimation. We can leave half FTA because it's quite used as an automation because it's performed daily, but there are not so much PDFs to work for the user. The frequency of the process, this is quite easy to do because it's daily. The process is performed daily by the bot and is also performed daily by the users. The volume transaction, this is a really important things to consider, and usually is not too easy to do because the business users are not so sure sometimes on what are the estimation. We can put, for example, 50 because there are quite a lot PDF to work, but this is just an average. Also, as before, the average time it takes to process for all the process to run, considering that the extraction of PDF and insertion in SAP is quite fast, but there can be a few PDFs. We can put, like, for example, 5 minutes for the whole process to run daily. The average number of human errors is considering that is quite a simple process. It can be low, so we can put 5%, for example. The peak of the process is also it's quite subjective because it's not so easy to provide an estimation of a peak. But usually for a process like this, it's quite regular. So we can put regular. The number of steps, as we have seen in the documentation, there are not so many steps, but on considering all the things we have to move from PDF to SAP and then creating the Excel report, we can leave 50-25 steps. So it could be quite a correct estimation. How difficult are the decisions? I think that this process is really linear and there are no decisions. The only things to consider in the logic, if there are some errors in the extraction of the barcode, so the process will remove in the workflow in the error folder. Otherwise, it will be put in the work folder. The average number of cases that went in error is same as before. It's just an estimation. We can put 5% or we can change it, but just leave it at 5%. Number of applications, as we have seen in the presentation, we can check it again. There is the PDF reader, the barcode reader, SIP, and finally we can also count Excel because it's used in the report. So for file application, it can be a correct assumption. The access of the VDI, no, because it's not used. What percentage of the input data is digital? 100%, because it uses just the PDFs. Is any of your digital input scanned? The answer in our case is yes, because all the PDFs are scanned and then put in the folder. What percentage of your input data is structured? Ideally, greater than 80%. I think we can put greater than 80% because, as I've said in the beginning, all the data in the PDF are structured, so we always know where are the material number, the date, and the barcode. And also in SIP is an RP, so everything is structured correct. So finally, we have completed all the assessment. We can check which is the effort and which is the benefit. As you can see, this is a simple automation and is done daily, and there are quite a PDF to automate to work. So the effort is low, and there is an high benefit. So this will be considered a great process to automate. We will also see that the man hours a year that are freed are quite high. The error reduction also is high. Finally, the effort to implement this for the low effort, it's always the same, as I said at the beginning, because it's taken from this cell. So for the low effort, the total effort of hours will be always 230. I don't know if you have any questions on the process or on the assessment usage. I have not said it before, but in this initial part, there is just the descriptive part of the assessment. So you can put here the process name. In this case, I already put it in advance, DDT extraction, the business unit, the main function, all the responsible people, so they know which are the people involved in the assessment and in the automation project. There are not questions. We can also try to use the matrix on another process, which is also quite simple. And we did the assessment of this process just a few weeks ago. So it's quite new and quite easy to do the assessment. So in this process, it started when the user sends an email with some data regarding a case to analyze for the department. So the email contains the case number, the company, and the date of the retrieval of the email. The automation will start, will read this email, and after that it extracts the three data that are present in the email. It goes to an external public website, which is so it's not created by the client, but is used externally, and it puts the case number, and it retrieves a different number of data. So, for example, the quantity of the things asked for the case, the estimation delivery date, and so on. Finally, it goes to the CRM of the client. So this is an internal website, and it checks if the case is already present in the CRM. It updates the data with the data extracted from the previous website. If it's not present in the CRM, it creates a new case with the same data. Finally, with all this data, it prints the PDF of the case. There is a specific button on the website page in which it's possible to click, and it will download automatically a PDF with all the case data. Finally, as usual, a report is generated by the bot and is sent to the user that sent the first email, together with the PDF that is created by the CRM. So as you can see, this is a linear process. It can be a little more difficult because there are a few things to consider in the logic, and also it uses some applications that are not so easy to manage, like for example public websites and the email retrieval. So we can try to do another assessment. Some things will be the same, some things will change. So for example, the data is usually is digital and structured, but since it started from an email, it's possible that it's not so structured. So we can just to give different outcomes, we can try to put digital and unstructured. The process will change in the next 3 months. We can leave no changes expected, which is because it's quite a static and linear process. But for example, for this question, will your application change in the next 6 months? Since there is an external website, we don't know if it will change or not. We can ask the business user if it usually changes, but in order to give quite a dynamic assessment, we can put some change. How many full-time employees are needed to perform the process? Since this is a longer process than the previous one, we can put 1, because even if there are maybe less data to manage, it's longer than just retrieving data from a PDF. That will the frequency is always daily, because the mail are retrieved daily, and the volume transaction is maybe a little less, because it's not they're not received 50 emails every time. We can put, like, for example, 15. The average time is longer because it goes to the email, it goes to the 2 different websites, so we can put like 10 minutes. The average number of human errors, also this we can put a bigger number, because since it goes on different steps and it requires the copy and paste of different things, it's possible that some errors are done. We can put an higher value. The peak in the process we can leave regular, since there are no peaks. The steps, this depends on how many data are extracted and then put on the 2 websites, but it's surely is bigger than 25 steps. Sorry. So we can put 25, 40. I think it's a correct estimation. This we can leave the process linear, because even if it's longer, it doesn't have so many logic steps inside. The number of cases unable to complete, we can put a higher number, because it depends on a public website. So it's possible that the website won't be available from time to time, maybe 15%. Number of application, we can count it again, but I think it's always 4 or 5 application. It doesn't use a VDI, data is digital. In this case, there are no data scanned. and the percentage of data structured, we can put a lesser percentage since it comes with an email. So the users have a template to follow in order to send an email, but it's possible that sometimes they won't follow the template, and it will be good that the process will run anyway. So we can put 60/40, 60/80, sorry. So as you can see, even if the process is quite simple, the effort went higher, almost double as before, and the benefit is less. So it went from high benefit to medium high benefit. So the effort estimation, it's always the same, but since it has a less benefit, when we perform an assessment, we will, let's say, start with the development of the first case, and just when the first case will be done, we can proceed with this one. I don't know if you have any questions about any of the two assessments. If you don't have any question, maybe you can, if also you have any question related to the community topic, or there are any other presentation webinar that you like will be presented in the future, let us know. I will also share again our emails, so you can write to us if you have any questions in the future, or any other topics that you want to discuss. We are really on time, so thank you everyone for taking part in this topic. And again, if you have any other questions in the future, you can write to us directly. And see you on the next community event.
Thank you all.